Our scripture for today comes out of Deuteronomy, the 30th chapter, and verses 15 through 20. And it says, "See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if you turn your hearts away and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him, for that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give to you, to your ancestors, Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." I want to talk for a few moments from that simple topic, choose life. Choose life. You know, today, this week, I've been thinking a lot about choices in a very serious way and in some very simple ways. On the simple ways, it was when I decided I wanted to look for some jeans, and I went online. I come from the days, and some of you have been there too, but I come from the days where we didn't have a whole lot to choose from. We had Wrangler, we had Lee, and we had Levi's. I'm going way back. We had Wrangler jeans, we had Lee jeans, we had Levi. But then something happened during that whole disco period where all of a sudden we went from just those jeans, very simple jeans, you just put them on and maybe they fade over time. But we went to this season of having things like Gloria Vanderbilt jeans and Calvin Klein jeans and Sassoon jeans and Gerbeau jeans. You may not remember those. I'll just tell you really quickly. I remember calling Macy's downtown in Atlanta one day. I was looking for Gerbeau jeans, and the lady answered the phone because it was spelled Girbaud. And the lady answered the phone, and I said, "I called because I want some Gerbeau jeans." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have those." I'm like, "Are you sure? I thought someone told me they got them there." And she said, "No." She said, "How do you spell that?" And I spelled it for her. And she said, "Oh my goodness, I've been saying Gerbaud." It was a very confusing time. It was easier when we had Wrangler and Lee and Levi's, but suddenly we had things that we couldn't even pronounce. But today is even worse. We have mid-rise, we have low-rise, we have high-rise. I don't understand this, but they had wedgie jeans. And the jeans started getting tighter and tighter. And then people just say, "Well, I'll give up." Now we just have jeggings because they're so tight. But we have stonewash, we have acid wash, we have indigo. But the other day when I was looking for jeans, I was like, it's too much, it's too much. Just give me a pair of standard fit Levi 501 jeans, just basic. We have too many choices sometimes, and it just gets difficult. And the prevailing logic is having many choices is a good thing. We like choices. But in fact, studies show that the more choices we have, the less likely we are to actually make a decision, the less likely we are to really make a choice. That's because we don't want to make the wrong choice. We don't want to say, "Well, what if I choose this and then by tomorrow I want that?" It's too much sometimes. Mathematically, it makes sense because think about it. If you have two things to choose from, you have a 50% chance of being right. If you have 5 things to choose from, you only have a 20% chance of being right. So our lives become filled, and overfilled with options and points of decision along the way. And it can get pretty confusing. In the long run, most of our decisions are the result of a combination of both rational thinking and intuition. But eventually, choices have to be made. We can't go through our life and not make any choices. Even if we decide not to choose, that's a choice. We think about that a lot of times when it comes to voting, and people say, I'm not going to vote because I don't like this one or that one. Well, if you don't vote, you're probably going to end up the person you don't want. And you can't say anything about it because you didn't choose. So the best we can do in life is gather as much information as possible about our options. And then we do a cost benefit analysis or something like that. You weigh your options, and then you trust your brain, and as we say, your gut, to make a final decision. We do it in our personal lives, in our relationships. We do it on our jobs. We do it in our political decisions. And like the people for whom the text was written today, we do it in our spiritual life and our faith perspective. Our text for today comes out of the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy comes from a Latin word that means second law. It includes the repetition of the laws that were in previous books in the Bible. It includes the 10 Commandments that were in Exodus. It includes other legislative prescriptions of how the law is supposed to be administered. It's included among the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, which tradition has held. Those first 5 books were written by Moses, which doesn't make any sense because it tells the story of Moses's death. You don't write about your death after you're dead. So that ought to be our first clue that this was not written by Moses, but it was written by, as biblical scholars suggest, it was written by a group of people. And it was written by a group of people over a span of centuries. So whoever these writers were, they compiled a very comprehensive guidebook of how the people of Israel were supposed to live. Hence, this has been described in some cases as a national polity for Israel. But in the passage we read for today, it's written for people who find themselves at a point of decision. Passage actually begins in the 29th chapter, and it goes through the 30th and the 30th chapter and the 20th verse. And it's a final words of a lengthy speech that's attributed to Moses on the plains of Moab before crossing into the promised land. But the people who actually heard and read this text, they had already experienced that. That was already in their history. But they were being reminded of what happened because they were at another point of decision in the life of Israel. But they had come from a history that was rooted in a covenantal relationship with God. But you know how the story goes. Over the years, they strayed away from the commitments that were made by their ancestors. They had been captured more than once. They had in many ways become disappointed and disillusioned by the God their ancestors believed in. Have you ever felt that way? Even today? You know, you have what your grandma taught you and what maybe your parents taught you, your Sunday school teacher, somebody, they taught you all these things about God. And we thought that God was going to answer our prayers in a particular way. And we thought that if we acted a certain way, things were going to go right for us. And then we found out over time that that is not the case. And that's what happened to these people that received these words. You know, they had seen and heard all these things about God, but it didn't go the way they thought it should. And in the meantime, they also lived among people with other traditions, other explanations of history, other gods, or no God at all. They lived around all kinds of people and situations. So when you find yourself in that place, as these people found themselves in our text, or the ones who were the recipients of this text, we find us in a place where they found themselves in a place, and we find ourselves in places where life can become difficult, empty, and confusing. So what happens when you have a confused history? You have disappointments. You have everything you thought you believed in not coming together the way you thought it would. What do you do when you're in that place? You have to make some other decisions. You have to decide, which way am I going to go? And in this text, these people were presented with a question. And the text says, I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live. What kind of life was this writer talking about? Life for the writer and life for the people of Israel was rooted in their belief in and their love for Yahweh, God, the one God that they thought of at the time, the one God who brought their ancestors through, the one God who had been part of their history, even when their history was full of ups and downs. There was one God that was with them through the whole thing. That's why the text goes on. It says, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him. That means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Basically, it was saying, have love for God, the God who is the God of love, who was with your ancestors and who has been with you throughout your future, even when your future didn't unfold the way you thought it should. It's basically saying, go back to that God, make a choice for that God, because that God will open the door for you to a future that's filled with hope. Love makes a difference, my friend. Love makes us believe that something good can still happen. Just believing in love, even when you don't see love, just believing in love makes a difference. It gives you an opportunity from the inside to say, oh, maybe it's going to be better. I believe it's going to be better. That love is going to win out over hate and evil. It's just got to. We have to hold on to that. Because this week, I was thinking about how much love makes a difference in every aspect of our lives. Love for ourselves, love for our families and our friends, love for and from our pets. Love even makes a difference in how we interact with our coworkers. Because if we look at our coworkers even through a lens of love, we'll find that life, even with difficult people, can be more bearable. Because it's not that they're loving us so much, but it's because we're making a choice that we want to be loving people. And that no matter how much you come at me the wrong way, I'm not going to come back at you like that. Number one, that's too stressful. Number two, it takes me off of the center of who I believe myself to be. But if I can stay rooted in love, that's why this text is so important about choosing love, choosing God, making a decision that we're going to stay rooted in that, even if we don't get the same response back. We're going to be part of a God whose nature is love. And that means our nature becomes love. And all of our decisions are based out of that place. You know, this week, we've had a few ways to think about love. When I think of democracy, I think of love that includes everybody. When I went to vote this week, I tried to consider politicians and social perspectives like healthcare for all, That's a loving choice. Preschool for children, that was a loving choice. A Secretary of State that seemed sincere, that was a loving choice. A choice for a governor that seems to have a heart to care for all people, that was a choice. That, I don't know if you all, anybody else here went to vote this week, but the list of options of choices that we needed to make on that ballot were numerous. But it was easy to make the decisions when we let love be the filter that we use. Even in this week, we're hearing a lot about choice when we hear about this debate about abortion. You know, it's interesting to me that it's such a critical thing to discuss. However, I've seen politicians just get stuck on the wrong thing. They get stuck on who leaked this report and who betrayed somebody. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about, what does love say? What does love say for us to do? Not that love tells us how to tell somebody else how to live their life, but love says, I'm going to do what's best for people. Love says, what about poor women who wouldn't have access to options, not even if she was raped or if she was a victim of incest? What does love say in that case? Love says you care for people. Love doesn't say that you take away people's options. Love says you make sure that people have the freedom, the will, and the desire to make loving decisions in the laws they make, in the choices they make. And then you leave that decision up to the individual. Then you say, what does love say about social conditions that limit a person's ability to care for their children? Does not love say we need to work harder to create a more just and a more equitable society where people have everything they need so they don't have to make difficult decisions that they might not want? When the text says choose life, it doesn't mean choose birth. What it means is choose a life that is life more abundantly. Like Jesus said, I come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Not that you'll have more stuff, but that you'll have an abundance of love. It means to choose a future filled with love for God and with love for the people God has given us to love. It means choosing a future where we know and believe that in the end, love wins. It means you make a choice every day not to wake up and feel, oh, here we go again. We've got all these problems. We've got violence. We've got too many things going on in our world. But it means, no, we choose God. We choose love. The people who heard this text originally were at a major turning point in their life. They had to make a decision. They were living in a very troubled time and needed some sort of choice that would make life worth living going forward. They had to decide what kind of mindset, what kind of belief system were they going to have out of all the options that were around them. Their choice was either to fully commit to a life based in the values and in the care of a loving God, or embrace other options that were rooted in things that would eventually pass away or would lead to destruction for themselves or for others. And they didn't have a whole lot of time to make that choice. Like the people who heard and read the text originally, you and I are standing at a very precarious edge of a way of life. War, inflation, climate change, gun violence, ongoing cases of COVID-19, rises in suicides, growing political and social division, We are living at the edge of making a decision of how is our world going to be going forward. If we ever needed a reminder to choose life, we need that reminder now. Choose the kind of life that is led by the kind of hope filled in choices guided by a loving God who would tell us, believe in love, to believe in life, and make decisions in our world that enhances life in a positive way for as many people as possible. You know, the text calls for obedience. It says to obey God, and that is to obey the commandment to love one another. It means to obey God who loves us. You know, we don't like that word, obedience. You know, a lot of times when I'm doing weddings for people, the first thing they want me to take out is the word to obey, to honor and obey. Well, obey is not really a bad term. It's only a bad term when it's one-sided. But, you know, God calls us to obedience. I don't care what anybody says, obedience is not a bad thing because it's not really about being controlled on the outside. Obedience really is about being controlled on the inside. You know, there are some things in life that we don't want to obey. We don't want to obey evil. We don't want to obey people who would do us harm or do other people harm. But we do want to obey where love is. We do want to obey where love brings life and hope to people. You know, even in marriage, a real active marriage takes place in the heart. It's not taking place in the church or the synagogue. It's a choice that you make not just on your wedding day, but it's a choice that you make over and over again. How you treat your husband or your wife, you make a decision every day you wake up. I've learned this ever since I got married. You make a decision every day that no matter what that person did yesterday, you're going to love them today. No matter what you two ran into, whatever you may have had to struggle through, you make a decision over and over again that I'm going to obey the commitment that I made. Not the commitment so much that I made to you, but the commitment I made to myself. I made a commitment to love. And similarly, that's how we ought to be with everybody. I'm going to obey myself. And inside of me, I made a decision to love. I made the decision to care. I make the decision to do what I believe God would create me and command me to do, and that is to love. My friends, that's how we choose life, because we choose love. And, you know, people tell me, Kathi, you talk about love all the time, same thing over and over and over again. Well, what else is there for us to talk about? What else is there for us to believe in? Yes, there's evil around us. I don't want to believe in that. Yes, there's hopelessness around us. I don't want to believe in that. I want to believe in love. I want to believe in hope. I want to believe in positivity, don't you? That's what this text is offering us. And that's what this text is reminding us. And I'm grateful for this text, even though it says to obey. Well, I'm going to obey the choice and the commitment I make to myself and to my God. And when I deal with you at work, when I deal with you on the street, when I deal with you in the voting booth, the choices that I make are choices that are rooted in love. And they are choices that I can defend and choices that I will share. My friends, Stephen Covey said, there are three constants in life. He used to tell us there was one. He used to say it was change. But there are three. Those constants are change, choice, and principles. This text is telling us to choose love because things around us will change. But our choice today ought to be rooted in the principle that's inside of us. And that principle, that choice today, is to choose life and to choose love, and let that guide everything you do. Thank you for listening today.